Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Moti-Vitality MV member exclusive, how to deal with toxic employees. I really do appreciate everybody jumping on here. Right now, I am not going to mute everybody. If it starts getting kind of noisy, then I will go ahead and mute everybody. But right now, it's pretty quiet. If you think that you're going to have some background noise, if you don't mind going ahead and muting your own phone, then that would be awesome. But I really, really do love having participation in this, in our webinars. And so please feel free to pop in with questions or pop in with suggestions or comments. This is something that, how to deal with toxic employees, something that unfortunately I've had to work with often, but it's not saying that my thoughts are the only thoughts out there. So I love additional participation. As always, we want to say thank you. I really appreciate everybody jumping on here. I know it's early on a Wednesday morning and everybody's busy, but I really do appreciate you jumping on. Reason for me doing this week is Kelly is lucky enough to be in Alaska right now. He's on a cruise with his fiance, which is awesome. And so he is disconnected for a few days, which is great. But again, thank you so much for joining. Okay, toxicity. Merriam-Webster definition of toxic, containing or being poisonous material, especially when capable of causing death or serious debilitation. Toxicity in the workplace isn't always that horrible, but sometimes it can be pretty poisonous, and it can cause some debilitation. But extremely harsh, malicious, or harmful, I think that in the workplace that might be a little bit better definition.
To schedule an appointment today.
Okay, I have to.
Experience the difference of filtered water at home. Our bottleless drinking water units grant easy access to ultra-filtered water without the hassle of bottled alternatives. We also provide commercial filtration.
Okay. Alrighty, sorry I had to go ahead and mute everybody. We had a great commercial there, though. Okay, so the Urban Dictionary definition of toxic is, and I love this, toxic is a group of people who are rude and can't be nice. They are not true to people around them. They need an attitude check, their personality, they're so unappealing, it makes the people around them suffer and turn rude as well. Beware of toxics. I don't think that it could be more clearly defined than that. So I loved it when I saw that. Sorry, I'm trying to get this little box out of the way here. It's not working. Okay. So managing negativity. Negativity can be toxic. It really can. It is more than frustrating to have toxicity and negativity within the workplace. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, but I think every single company that we have been in, that I have been in, there's at least one toxic person. And when Moti-Vitality, we go in and we hire and we train with a company, what we do is we will go and talk to every single employee. And the reason that we do that is so that we can get a feel for the company, make sure that we're getting a correct fit for that company to build the team. So one of the things that we find is when we have all of the employees fill out a questionnaire, there's usually one or two people that they single out and they say, you know what, this person is so hard to deal with. This person is just, I hate coming to work because of this. And it's so frustrating that, we run into those things. But unfortunately, it's there. It's with pretty much every single company that we've walked into. So we're going to talk a little bit how to deal with those people. You know, unfortunately, everybody gets caught up in this workplace negativity from time to time. I used to work with this lady that was Corinne. She was just the sweetest person. And we had a toxic person that came into the office. And it was really interesting how she ended up, you know, she used to be able to make somebody who was just a horrible person sound like Mother Teresa. You know, she always found the positive, but when this toxic person came in, every once in a while I'd hear her say something that was really negative, and I thought, my gosh, where is that coming from? And it was basically, she was kind of feeding off of the negativity from the toxic person. As managers, it is your job to stop negativity from impacting productivity and morale. You know, we have to nip it in the bud. We can't let it go on. And, you know, the other employees, yeah, they can handle their own, fight their own battles. But the bottom line is, if you're a manager, it's your job to make sure that there's not negativity within the company. So you need to recognize the signs. You need to locate the source. And you need to turn the negative into a positive. Let me go ahead and, looks like I need to mute a couple more. Okay, try turning negatives into positives. Okay, so what are some of the signs? When you have a toxic person, signs that you're going to see, and they're pretty much right out there, they're going to complain. They're going to complain about absolutely everything. They're just not happy. You know, there's a lot of uncertainty when you have somebody that's toxic. You know, uncertainty both ways. You have where they're uncertain about their job, and you're uncertain if you really, you know, is this going to work out or not? And you feel uncertain. Can I trust this person? Can I trust them to be, you know, happy in front of customers and represent our company with honesty and integrity? You know, usually a toxic person, they're going to argue with you a lot. They're going to second guess everything that you say. And like I said, sometimes come straight out and argue. You're going to get a lot of anti-management comments so many times. Now, there's a difference between constructive criticism and there's a difference between bickering. I'm going to use that B word, I guess. It's probably better than the other B word. But, you know, it doesn't matter what management does. You're going to have that one person that is just, you know, complaining and just saying that management is doing it only to make more money and so on and so forth. And challenging authority. That happens a lot when as soon as something's said, they have to come right back and say, well, you know, I don't think we should do it this way. For example, maybe changing the brand of faucets that you're using for your reverse osmosis. Or changing the product line. Maybe you are going from a one particular reverse osmosis to another. And, you know, as soon as you do that, you're doing it either for cost savings or you're doing it because the particular reverse osmosis that you're using, you're having a lot of problems with. But sure enough, you have that one person that's like, well, you know, I don't feel that you should change it. You know, and they're always challenging you. Decreased participation. Maybe this person was always really involved. Maybe they stuck around after the meetings and talked with everybody and, you know, had kind of a positive attitude, but now it's like as soon as the meeting's over with, boom, they're out the door. Or just, you know, decrease not coming into the office as often or anything like that. And challenging change. Again, this goes back to maybe they were you know, you changed a product line or you changed the way, I know one of the biggest things is when it comes to technology. If you have somebody who is not used to working with technology, especially service technicians or even sales professionals, you go out there and now they have to have this tablet and they have to check all these boxes and they have to make sure everything's done right, and then all of a sudden the battery dies, you know, and so they get so frustrated with it. Instead of looking at the positive as, hey, we're going to save so much on paper, we're going to save so much time, this is automatically going to get sent directly to the office, so I don't have to worry about going to the office, turning in paperwork before I head home tonight, making myself late for dinner with my family. They're going to challenge the change. When I worked with a company, we had weekly meetings, and I remember the first few times I went into weekly meetings, I really enjoyed it. I did, but we had somebody who was very toxic. He was very productive. He was always our top sales, but he was really high maintenance. And it never failed that after the meeting, everybody went out to breakfast up the road. And here was that one person just complaining and, you know, well, you know, they shouldn't be doing this and they shouldn't be doing that. And everybody would just kind of get on that same bandwagon. And I was new to the industry. I was new to the company. And so I started kind of believing those things. I started thinking, oh gosh, is this the right company for me? You know, am I going to keep running across these same challenges that this person's talking about? Well, what we ended up doing, we had a couple more people that came into the company. They were newer than I was, and I was fortunate enough that those two other people recognized that, you know, this isn't healthy, this isn't right. So when everybody else went to breakfast in one place, we went to breakfast in a different place. And we talked about positives, how we could, you know, how we could canvas together, how we could create more of our own business, how we could try to do a bulk advertising, things like that. And it made such a difference for me, myself, to not be around that toxicity. So locating the toxicity. Misery loves company. This is going to go back to like what I was just saying with going to breakfast. And I get an employee always wants somebody to validate their views. And they get to a point where they say it over and over and over enough. And I'm sure we have all had these situations where somebody, you know, they talk you into it. Where, you know, well, you know, we really should be using this product. We really should be using this product. And it gets to a point where you're nodding and smiling. Or you might just say, oh, yeah, you know, that might be a good idea. And then immediately they think, okay, this person's on board with me. And they think that that's the way to say, okay, yeah, I agree with you. And so I'm going to jump on your ship instead of, you know, the happy ship. I'm going to jump on the misery ship. You need to figure out, is there one person that is being toxic? Is it a whole pack of people, a lone wolf or a whole pack? Sometimes one person brings a lot of people in, and sometimes it's just, you know, the personalities, they click, and they like to sit in the corner and complain with each other. You know, unfortunately what happens with that is that not only do you have one bully, you have a lot of bullies. And you don't only have a lot of bullies that are working against the other employees, but they're congregating together to see how can we upset management? How can we, you know, fight to get our way? Whether that way is right or wrong, how do we fight to get our way? And there's a difference about fighting for positive, and there's a difference of fighting for negative. Is this new, or has everybody been conditioned to accept this? This gets to be really frustrating. There are so many companies that we go into, and you know, there's that one person, or maybe two people, but usually there's that one person has been there for many years. They used to do a great job, but somewhere, whether it was in personal life or whether it was just miserable with their own position, that all of a sudden they started getting toxic, and they felt like, gosh, you know, I'm in charge of this, and I guess they got too big for their britches. But because that person's been there so long, and there's somebody that has a lot of knowledge, that it finally, you know, everybody's just conditioned to accept it. I can probably, I'm going to say probably management is where you will find this happening the most often. And it's usually because that one person is, whether they're overworked, or they're just, you know, too busy, they're bored with their jobs or whatever. But I've seen it a lot where management, you know, gets to a point where they just, they're not happy, and everybody has been kind of trained, well, it's okay, you know, we're not going to get rid of that person because of, and please note that I'm not saying get rid of people, but, you know, we're not going to even ask them to change because it's just going to cause too much conflict. So, you know, but if it's new, we need to start really looking into where has this come from? What kind of impact does this have on the team? You have to think about how much time do you spend at work. I look at a lot of companies that we work with, and you think about it. You come into work 7 o'clock in the morning, you leave at 5 o'clock at night. And, you know, you put in your 9 hours or whatever it is because you have an hour lunch in there. So then maybe you throw on, let's just say, even a half-hour drive time. So you've got 10 hours that you have been at work, working with that team. You go home 5 o'clock at night, usually go to bed about 10 o'clock. So you only have 3.5, 4 hours with your own family, and then they're sleeping. You know, you're spending more time at work than you are with your own family. That's just sometimes a way of life. But when you have a negative attitude that's coming in to work every day, then it wreaks havoc. I used to work at a job, I worked there for 13 years in tool and die, and I think I've told this to quite a few people, but I worked tool and die for about 13 years. When I first started out there, I absolutely loved it. My first 12 years there, I worked a lot of hours. I worked 50 to 60 hours a week, and you know, I still found time for my family, found time for everything else, but eventually the owner's wife came in, and she took over the company, and she was a micro manager. And I remember my last year of working there, I would sit in the parking lot and literally cry before I had to go in. On Sunday night, my stomach would just churn. I was just like, I was a mess because I didn't want to go to work Monday morning. And, you know, I hated that feeling. Eventually, along with the 3/4 of the rest of the company, we were laid off, let go, whatever you want to call it. And I thanked her because I knew that at that point, that was my calling, that I would never, ever work in a position where I hated my job, where I hated going into work. I just would never do it. And the bottom line was it a bad experience? Yes, but it taught me what I never want to do again. So you can't have your employees sitting in the parking lot bawling their eyes out before they come into work just because one person is making them have a bad day. Life's just not worth it. You know, your team, you're going to get a loss of enthusiasm. That's what happened when this one person came in. I mean, we used to be excited to see each other. We'd come in on Monday mornings and, hey, how was the kids' soccer game? How was the graduation party? And it got to a point where everybody just literally had these blank looks on their faces. And we weren't excited about what we were doing when we were designing or when we were talking to customers or things like that. There just wasn't the enthusiasm. Productivity, definitely productivity went down because nobody really wanted to go above and beyond anymore. Why? It didn't make sense. We were still going to end up getting screamed in one way or another. And so we just didn't really go above and beyond. When it came to goals, I will admit that we started second-guessing goals. Why is it that, you know, management wants us to do this? Why is it that we're shooting for this when we're really not getting any recognition for it? And definitely, we were afraid to brainstorm. Because there were so many times that, you know, I would go and I'd come up with an idea. One of the things that I had to do was take care of inventory we called it stores. I'd take care of inventory for some of our customers. And I came up with a really good idea of how to, I was going to spend probably about maybe a total of 20 hours on rearranging the stores room and then making a log of all of our inventory on like an Excel spreadsheet. This is when Excel first came out, and it was really exciting. And so I wanted to take that 20 hours and do that because it was going to save me so much time in the long run. And as soon as I took that idea to the owner, it was, you can't do that. How do you expect us to spend an extra 20 hours and pay you an extra 20 hours for something like that? You know, every time I went in there, I was ridiculed on how to brainstorm or what I was brainstorming about. So it just got to a point where it was like, you know what, I'm just going to come in, I'm going to do my job, I'm going to leave, I'm going to be done. And again, the morale was just, it really went down. Teams ended up dividing, and this happens a lot, especially when it comes to, you know, I'm going to kind of point out service and sales. Sometimes you get one bad seed on one of those teams, and instead of working together as one company, as one large team, all of a sudden your teams start getting divided. And a lot of times it's because you have one or two people that are, you know, oh, well, you know, that sales guy, all he does is, you know, it takes him 2 seconds to promise something, but it takes 2 hours for me to do it, you know, and he just complains about it. And same on the other end, sales, you know what, I don't see what the big deal is. Why can't they just go ahead and run that refrigerator line? You know, what's the big deal? Why don't they just go ahead and, because I forgot something on the paperwork, he's smart, he knows he can do it. So there is a huge impact on the team when you have toxicity. Now, there's a difference between toxicity and conflict. Sometimes you might have interpersonal conflicts. This is a conflict that's, you know, it's still inevitable. When you combine different backgrounds, skills, opinions, that is what an interpersonal conflict is. And, you know, sometimes you can't change those things. We come from different backgrounds. Now, that is something, I go back to when Moti-Vitality does hiring, we try to make sure that we find somebody that fits in. A perfect example, we've used this often, a perfect example is we had a company, we went in, we interviewed all the employees, and we found out that this was a very religious company. And they were very strong in their faith. They held morning prayer, they had Bible study at lunch, they prayed over all of their pendings, things like that. And so we had to bring somebody in that was able to fit within that realm. And we, of course, during an interview, we can't say, so what church do you go to and who did you vote for? You know, so we had to make sure that we kind of tiptoed around those things. And fortunately, we were able to find somebody who was absolutely awesome, fit in wonderfully. But, you know, when doing the hiring process, sometimes we have to make sure that that person that we're bringing in is going to fit in. You know, and if they're not going to fit in, if don't have all the same beliefs, then we have to make sure that that person has a personality that is willing to accept others. Goal-oriented conflicts. Okay, this is probably a huge, huge misconception for toxicity and conflict. Now, goal-oriented conflicts, we have the same goal. We just have a different technique of looking at it. A great example is maybe where you have an office manager. She is in charge of the purse strings. She's in charge of making sure that we're saving money, or the company is saving money, making sure that it's being spent properly, making sure that, or the service manager also, making sure that, you're not wasting, extra product or anything like that. But at the same time, you have somebody, a service technician, who's trying to install something, and they need 4 elbows instead of 3. And they want extra stock on their trucks just to make sure that they have everything they need. So you have to look at it as the bottom line is they have the same goal, making the customer happy and making sure that they're productive, but using different techniques. Office with service to sales, that's one of the differences on goal-oriented, and service and sales. Again, this goes back to what it takes, sales 2 seconds to say, it takes service 2 minutes to do, or 2 hours to do, and, there's times that service, they don't want to go above and beyond, and it really frustrates sales. Structural conflicts. This is usually, is each member of your team in the right position? I am one that is a very strong believer in if you have somebody that has a positive attitude, the attitude is something that you can find, that you need to find in a person. Anybody's trainable, but sometimes they're just not in the right position. So maybe if they're not working out in one position, maybe it's time to review and move into another position. I'm going to go back to where I was working for 13 years. I started out in quality control, and I had no schooling for quality control. I'd worked at another small shop for 5 years, and this was all, it was automotive. And so there was the ISO 9000, and there was all of the different certifications that automotive companies had to get. And I did really good moving into that position when I first started. The first 5 years I was in quality control, but it came to a point where there were a lot of certifications that the company needed, and I wasn't able to go back to school to learn how to get those certifications. So the owner came to me and said, hey, you're a huge asset to our team. However, we need to bring somebody else in that's more of an expert on this. And I totally appreciated it, especially the way that it was confronted to me. Again, I was part of the team. I appreciated the fact that they weren't just going to fire me because I wasn't able to do that job. And they moved me into a position that I actually absolutely loved. And they brought somebody in that was able to lead the whole company, or all of our companies at that point, to the certification that we needed in the automobile industry. So, okay, we're going to have a little bit of a talk about interpersonal conflict. And please type in. I'm looking for suggestions on how everybody would like to, or how you think that we should handle these. I am going to go ahead. I don't know if I can participants, how to, oops, didn't want to do that. Okay, I might be getting some background noise here. Okay, interpersonal conflict. So, Joe is a huge Lions fan. He has cheered them on every home game for 20 years. I'm from Michigan, I gotta say this. And even stuck with them through the perfect season. That's when we had the 0-16. It was a perfect season. I don't know if it was in the right direction, but we were 0-16. Larry was born and raised in Wisconsin and proudly wears his cheese on his head every Sunday morning during football season. Monday mornings, Joe will congratulate John on his team success. However, Larry ridicules Joe when his Lions lose and say, They got lucky if the Lions win. This makes for a stressful Monday for Joe. How should they handle this situation? So, okay, I'm looking for suggestions. Anybody? You don't have any Green Bay fans out there? Okay. You know, when it comes to personal conflict, viewpoints, I mean, we just had a heck of an election, and on top of that, there is every single day constant conflict on viewpoints of political. You start throwing in, you know, just everything going on in the news these days. It's hard to make everybody happy because everybody has different views. We have to remember disagreement is not disrespect. If Larry is kind of being a jerk to Joe every single Monday, maybe it's up to us to kind of, in a joking maybe, or even in a serious, say, hey, you know what? You have to kind of, you know, lay off a little bit. If it's bothering Joe a lot, you know, if Joe can give it right back, then great, you know, but it sounds to me in this situation, Joe is like, hey, you know, good job to your Green Bay Packers. And here's Larry, yeah, but yeah, your Lions, they just got lucky. Okay. And sometimes you have to agree to disagree. That is just something that you have to do. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on with my mute button. Okay, goal-oriented conflict. Ben and Jen. Ben is the sales manager. He's having issues with Jen, the customer service manager, because customers are not getting the support he expects after he's made a sale. Both have had a great working relationship until now. Jen feels Ben is throwing her under the bus when he talks to the general manager about this conflict. They agree customer satisfaction is the utmost importance. How should they handle this situation? Does anybody have suggestions? Okay, is everybody still there? Mark, do you have any thoughts? Okay. So my thought on this is maybe they need to review their policies. Maybe they need to implement a follow-up procedure or something like that. You know, possibly there's not anything in the books that says, or, you know, as a procedure that says maybe Ben should go ahead and do a follow-up with that actual customer. Maybe it's a situation where customers are calling up a year later and saying, hey, you know, I'm having problems with the timer being set on my softener. You know, we had a power outage and they're getting bad customer service, maybe rudeness or something from Jen's team. So maybe they need to go ahead, review their policies and set up, you know, scripts or things like that and figure out what do we do as a follow-up procedure. Okay, structural conflict. Sue has worked with ABC Water for 5 years. She's a great employee. She has excellent attendance, completes her work in a timely manner, and is a big asset to the company. Unfortunately, Sue has been having personal issues at home, and while her work performance is still excellent, her attitude with customers and coworkers has changed dramatically. Her once cheery voice has turned into short and accusing. How should they handle this? This was something that, and you know, I'm using when I worked at this one company many times because I do see this in almost every single office, almost every single company that we go into, I do see structural conflict. And I don't want to call out certain companies or start using them as examples because some of them may be on this call or listening to it later. But this is something that happened when I was in the tool and die business. We had a girl that she was going through a divorce. She was going through some health issues. Her kids were being little jerks. And, you know, it just, her life, her home life sucked, bottom line. And so when she came to work, she did her work, but we were all responsible for answering phones. And we were supposed to take an hour a day that we were responsible for answering the phone so the rest of us could get work done. Well, she got to a point, she'd pick up the phone and she was just very short on the phone. You know, just, she'd say, you know, ABC water instead of, it's a great day at ABC water, you know, and she just, and then as soon as somebody would say something, just a minute, you know, it wasn't please hold. When she had a telemarketer call or somebody that called and hung up or something like that, she'd slam the phone down. And the rest of us were just on edge, and it sucked. We hated when it was her turn to answer the phone. So what we ended up doing, you know, is the manager, she used empathy. And, you know, she talked to her about her negative attitude and said, you know what, maybe for a while, let's take you off the phones until you're starting to feel a little bit better. Also goes back to, like I said, when I was asked to move into a different position when I was in tool and die, they made it a positive. They said, hey, this is for the benefit of the whole company. Do you mind moving into this position? And I loved it. I was so thankful for it. Okay, so dealing with negative attitudes, sometimes we have the Debbie Downers. Oh my gosh, we always run into the Debbie Downers. It's just that person that doesn't know how to look at the positive. I will totally and 100% admit there was a time in my life that I was such a Debbie Downer, and I a lot of times have to catch myself. When, you know, sometimes just complaining, and I can't stand when I do that. But it took somebody coming to me and saying, do you realize that you complain a lot? And I sat back and I thought about it, and it's like, oh my gosh, I do. I don't ever have anything nice to say. A lot of it had to do with the people that I was around. There were a lot of negative attitudes that I was around, and it just, I fed off of it. So I try really hard now to make sure I'm always staying positive. So anybody on this call, if you find me being a real Debbie Downer, just call me Debbie, I'll get it. Negative attitudes, they're so quick to label people or jump to conclusions. And they never make a mistake, but they are very quick to point a finger. I see this just all so often, not only in the workplace, in personal lives, but it really sucks when you're working hard and somebody is always pointing out your mistakes, always, and never once says, hey, you're doing a great job. They're just pointing out what you're doing wrong. And that happens not only with management, but it happens between teams. I just had to kind of diffuse a situation where it was on a sales team. You know, they were complaining about who was canvassing where, and it turned into kind of a battle where it's, well, he's doing this, well, he's doing that, you know, and so we had to kind of come together and come to a final conclusion of, listen, we need to all get along. Negative thinking turns into bad attitudes and spreads like wildfire. Politely point out the negative attitude. Like I said, somebody came to me and said, you know, you don't ever have anything really nice to say. You're always complaining about things. I recently saw this with my niece, and I pointed out to her, I could tell when she was spending time with her mom and when she was spending time with her dad. When she was spending time with her mom, she'd come back and we'd go out to eat or something, and she would just, I can't believe our waitress forgot their ketchup. I can't believe this. You know, the food is gross. And it's just like, wow, you know, you're lucky somebody's bringing you food, for goodness sake. You have to cook it yourself. And so I had to politely say, hey, you need to catch a grip because you're starting to sound like your mother, and that straightened her right up. So sometimes they don't realize how bad it sounds. I used to always tell my kids, you have to say, if you have a negative, you have to say 5 positives about that negative. So it's confirmed. It sucks. There was toxicity. How was it confirmed? You know, do you have other employees that are miserable? Are they just like, or did you physically see what was going on? Do you see this one person or this team of toxicity? Do you see them, you know, again, going back to the defying management? Do you see them making other employees miserable? Do you see the other employees complaining about this person? You know, are they afraid to talk to that toxic employee? This breaks my heart that, like I said, almost every company I go into, there is one person that's toxic, and somebody is afraid. Most of the team is afraid to go to that person and ask for something, even if it's in the best interest of the company or the customer. It's like, well, gosh, I really don't want to ask them to, you know, fix my paycheck, or I don't want to ask them to order those supplies because I'm just going to get the third degree. I used to, back to the tool and die, we used to get profit sharing, and it came just before Christmas time. It was awesome because it was a multi-million-dollar company, and I mean, there was one year I knew I was getting a huge bonus. I think my profit sharing / bonus, I think that year was $10,000. I was geeked that I was getting $10,000. I mean, that was going to take care of a lot of issues for me. I was a single mom, and I wanted to pay things off. But the owner, every single year, we got our review at the same time, and he never had anything nice to say. It was always, I mean, like, you just walked in crying because you knew you were going to get yelled at. You're walking out with that check like, I don't know if this was worth it. We can't have anybody afraid to talk to somebody else. The whole company has to work as a team. So we need to make sure that we're bringing that toxicity to a head. You know, our other employees, are they arguing with each other? Are they making anti-management comments? You know, why should they stand behind management if management's not going to back them up? And are they challenging authority? Decreased participation. Again, if you're miserable at work, then you just don't want to participate. And when it comes to change, they want to challenge it. So how do you resolve it? You need to catch it early. When you're quiet about it, then you know, it just means that you're allowing it. You're going to let it continue. You need to determine who the individual or individuals are, and you know, maybe that means talking with other employees. Maybe when you start seeing that they're having a negative attitude, maybe when you see that they're afraid to go talk to somebody, maybe you need to talk to them and say, can you give me specifics on what's going on? Figure out, is it personality conflict or is it somebody who's being completely toxic? You can't take your personal feelings into consideration, and this works both ways. Maybe this person, and I've seen this so many times, maybe this is a family member that's toxic. Maybe it's your best friend that is toxic. You can't take your personal feelings into consideration. Vice versa. Maybe you just don't like this person. Maybe every time that they walk in the door, you're like, yeah, I need to find a way to fire him or her. You can't take your personal feelings into consideration, especially if you're in a management role. Make sure you document it. If you don't document it, it didn't happen. Make sure you document it, and that goes back to talking to the other employees, asking for specifics. Again, the earlier you address it, it's the better. Ignoring the situation is just showing, hey, it's okay for you to act this way. It's okay for you to bully others. It's okay for you to walk in and talk negative about management. So you want to make sure that you're nipping it in the bud. So schedule a meeting. You want to talk to that toxic individual or individuals. If you have more than one person that you have that pack of wolves, then you need to bring each of those people in individually and try to do it at a time that they're not going to really know ahead of time, you know, what's going on. Because otherwise, you know, they're going to start calling each other up, text messaging, all of that. So what do we do during the talk? Don't wait until review time. This is a common mistake where, you know, well, I'm just going to wait until we have time, have review. Managers, owners, they don't like confrontation, especially owners. That's why they have management team below them, so they can handle all of that. But sometimes the owner does have to get involved. Managers, you know, you want everybody happy. You have a lot on your plate. You're looking at making sure that numbers are met and goals are met and everything else. You don't feel like babysitting, and sometimes that's what it is. It's babysitting. But you need to definitely set aside time to talk. Don't wait until it's review time. Review time is focusing on positives. Review time is setting goals, things like that. Not something that's as serious as toxicity and bullying. Make sure you're talking in private. Don't have a conversation where everybody else in the office can hear. If you have a small office, maybe it's a time to go out to breakfast or lunch or something like that. But make sure that you're talking in private. There may be a reason that this person has become so toxic. Maybe it's somebody else within the company. Maybe it's changes that have happened that they're not able to really relate to and accept, or maybe it's something that's going on in personal and at home that you don't know about. We had a gal that I used to work with. She was coming into work, had a really negative, bad attitude, and she was never like that before. And finally, I myself, as a co-employee, a co-worker, I caught her in the bathroom one day, and I said, you know, is everything okay? You just don't seem real happy lately. She finally told me. She was a very personal person. Of course, I didn't share this with anybody else until she shared it. But come to find out, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And 2 days later, her husband filed for divorce and literally moved out with his new girlfriend. So she was going through a lot. And so we don't know what kind of battles everybody is facing. So we have to talk to them in private, find out, get to the root of what's going on. And begin with, I need your help. I need to understand, why are you acting like this? I need your help in, how can we fix this? How can we change your conception of management? How can we change your attitude with the other department? Explain the inappropriate behavior with specifics. Talk about, well, you know, you happened to be talking to Jane the other day, or one of the other employees, I overheard you saying that, you know, you didn't feel like I was doing my job because of such and such situation. Or, you know, you walked into this meeting and you just had a chip on your shoulder the whole time and you argued with me. Can you explain to me why that was happening? Talk about the impacts that it has on the team, especially if it's somebody who is really unapproachable. You know, explain, hey, the rest of the team, they feel uncomfortable coming to you and asking you to purchase office supplies, or they feel uncomfortable with asking you to, you know, bring the trash cans up after you do an installation or something like that. Make sure that you talk about the impact it has on the team. And explain how this behavior impacts the customers. I mean, in all honesty, if we are having a bad day and we go to answer the phone with a customer and, you know, life just sucks at work, we're not going to, it's hard to keep a positive attitude when you're talking to a customer. So, you know, make sure that they understand the behavior, how their behavior is impacting their customers. It could even be that they're the toxic person, and when they walk into a home and they're in sales or they're in service or something like that, and you have a lot of customer complaints, you can't have that. That's just the bottom line. They need to change their attitude. Again, listen to their concerns. Maybe there is a reason that they're really having a hard time, and empower them. Ask them, what can we do to fix things? You know, sometimes that's what somebody's looking for. It's just a little bit of power. And so if you kind of switch things up so they think that it's their idea, then it's great. But the bottom line is you have to show zero tolerance for negativity. That is just the bottom line. Again, show zero tolerance to negativity, bring down the morale of the team. Discuss how they should handle future solutions. You know, maybe if they walk into a home and the customer really upsets them about something, maybe you have to tell them, you know what, stop, count to 10. Or just nod and smile when somebody has something controversial to say to you. Discuss how they can handle future problems. You need to also determine how they're going to be punished if their behavior continues. That's just the bottom line. You know, every company should have, if you don't have one, you should have, kind of a disciplinary policy. You know, do we talk first? Then the next one is this in writing. And then the next one is, okay, this is your third time. 3 strikes, you're out. Don't treat it as a threat. Be prepared to follow through. I see this so many times with managers and owners where it's a constant, you know, we go into companies and we hear somebody say, oh yeah, that person was talked to probably once a week they're talked to, but yet they still continue to do it. Be prepared to follow through. Don't keep, you know, saying you're going to write them up or whatever. Don't continue to say you're going to do it. Sometimes you have to do it and set an example and let them know, hey, we need business. After you're done with your meeting, set a follow-up date, whether it's in a week or whether it's in a month. Make sure you set up a date to follow up. See if everything's going okay. See if things have improved. Discuss the situation. Always wrap it up on a positive note, whether it's a joke or whether it's a, hey, you know what, the reason that I'm talking to you is because you are a positive part of this team. We love what you have to offer. You're excellent at service, or you're excellent at installations. You're excellent at, you know, bookkeeping, sales. You're great with the customers, but we need to work on how you're interacting with the other employees. Keep it on a positive note. Follow up. Make sure you keep your scheduled meetings. It's so easy for us to say, well, I know we were supposed to meet, and you know, at such and such time, on such and such date, but let's go ahead, we can push it back a little bit more. Make sure you keep to that meeting. And again, when you meet for the second time or the third time, give praises. Hey, I really appreciate that you helped out Judy with her reports or running payroll. I really appreciate that you're becoming a part of the team, and I appreciate the input that you had at the sales meeting. Don't nitpick. Sometimes when you've found a negative in a person, it's so easy to keep on bringing out the negative. Really find the strong negatives that you need to work on. And once those are fixed, don't nitpick. You know, keep it positive. And again, keep the documentations. Document the good and the bad, because, you know, somebody likes to see that they're appreciated when they do start improving. For the good of the team, don't lower your expectations for the toxic employee. Don't let negativity win. What happens sometimes is I ran into a football coach, Cass Tech High School, which in Michigan, they're usually #1. And he came into our retreat center this past weekend, and I just love when this team of men come into our retreat center, because they are so determined. They have goals. They're just a great group of kids. Most of them are from the inner city in Detroit, so they've led rough lives, and this is a great place for them to learn all of their, I guess, their life goals and how to be a part of a team. And he was talking to me about his quarterback. This was a quarterback, their star quarterback went on to play for, I think he ended up going to Arizona State, full ride scholarship. So the next in line quarterback came up. Well, now that he had all of this, hey, I'm the star quarterback, he got really cocky. And it is common for football coaches or coaches of any sort to say, you know what, but he earned his cockiness. He earned his special rights. I guess you could say. He earned the fact that he can sleep in and he can show up to practice whenever he wants because he's a really good player. So as I was talking to his coach, I said, he was talking about this quarterback. He's like, he's great. He's absolutely fantastic. He says, but he won't get out of bed when he's supposed to. He shows up for practice when he wants to, and I can't have that. And I said, well, didn't he earn that, though? He says, absolutely not. I am not going to lower my expectations for this one person because then everybody else thinks that they can do it. So don't let the negativity win. If you don't have change, don't wait until your follow-up meeting to discipline. You can't continually have this negativity. You just can't have it. Give them a last warning. Bottom line, the last resort, and I know this sounds so just blunt, but guess what? You're fired. There's the door. If you can't be part of the team, if you're bringing toxicity and sadness and making the lives around everybody else miserable, and to the point where somebody's sitting in the driveway of work crying, you don't need that negativity on your team. You're going to lose the productivity. You're going to lose that team morale. You're going to lose really good employees, because I have seen it so many times where employees leave because of one person. You have 10 people at least for one person. You just can't have it. So you also need to look at your level of negativity, you as a manager. Do you offer more praise or do you offer more criticism? That's really important. This was just a little proton, neutron type of thing. Unlike protons, I don't deal with negativity. Get it? Protons, they're positive. Neutrons, they're negative. Anyways, so do I create harmony or division with my words and actions? I know that was a little bit of water humor. If I get a chuckle, do I listen or do I interrupt? This is something managers, that is, you need to learn to listen, because a lot of times somebody will start in with, you know, I'm not happy because of, you know, the brand of toilet paper that you have in the bathroom, and immediately sometimes managers are going to say, well, you know what, the toilet paper is just too expensive. This is a true conversation that I've heard within a company. So you have to listen. Do you treat everyone fairly? There are some companies, whether it's family members or whether it is friends or whatever, you have to treat everybody fairly. And do I stand up for my team? Are you standing up against that one toxic person? Do you stand up when it comes to the owner making changes that isn't really maybe the best for the team? Manage yourself. You have to, oops, I need to move this little back here, I think. Manage yourself. Always keep a positive attitude. Be the type of coworker who delivers more positive contribution than negative chaos each day to our team. That is so important. Everybody likes being around a positive person. They do. It sucks when you walk in the morning and you have to kind of peek in the door to, quote unquote, test the waters to see what kind of an attitude an employee is in. You know, if you know every morning that when you walk into the office and you step in and say, hey, how's it going, Joe? That person's going to be like, great, good to see you. Then, hey, that really makes for, I want to go to that person first. And I have to peek in and say, hey, how's it going, Joe? And yeah, well, you know, didn't sleep well, and I'm getting tired of having to tell these, you know, salespeople that they have to get out there on time, and, you know, so you just want to keep a positive attitude. Consider every obstacle as a learning experience. That is one thing that I have always done. Like I said, when I was let go from my tool and die position, it was a learning experience. I learned in life I will never, ever have a position where I hate my job. Life's just too short. You know, and that's the same with everything else, is every obstacle is a learning experience. Don't speak negatively in front of your team or with the team. Just don't do it, because they feed on that, especially if it's management, then they think it's okay to complain about it. Turn complaining from the team. If your team isn't happy about something, turn it into problem solving. Ask them, how should we fix this? What will make the team happy? You know, maybe it's something that you didn't think about. Maybe it's a really good idea. So let's see if we can get some good problem solving going in there. And make sure if you have something negative to say, always counterbalance it with a positive. I think one of my favorite things that I read years ago before I was in any form of management was the barber always lathers the customer before they use the razor. Boy, did I chop that up. But, you know, always put a positive in there. Keep an open door policy. Please make sure you have an open door policy. You know, and make sure that you make work fun. We were at a doctor's office the other day, and we started laughing because they were all, it was towards the end of the day, and they were all laughing and joking. But I'll tell you what, every single person that came into into the room, they had such a positive attitude. They were all smiling. They were joking with us. And, you know, you have to make work fun. Life's just too short. You have to make it fun. And stay engaged day to day. Make sure that you're talking with your employees every single day. One person can make a difference. Whether it's positive or negative, one person can make a difference. But try to make that positive. Make it a positive difference. And everybody should try to make a positive difference. That was JFK that said that. So that is all that I have. Wow, I kept it to like an hour. That's awesome. Yay me. Tomorrow morning, we have our MV Pro call, and that's at 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 Central, 6:30 Mountain, and if you're over on the West Coast, hey, we love hearing from you also, so that's 5:30 in the morning, but we're worth it. We're trying to get a realtor on for tomorrow. I have to still get the final confirmation. If not, then it's going to be a surprise. So does anybody have any questions, anything that they want to add to what I had to say today?
No, but thank you.
Oh, hi, Stacy.
Yes.
Thank you so much. If anybody needs anything, Kelly, his number's there, but he won't answer. He's in Alaska. My phone number, my email address are there. If you have any questions, then just go ahead and give me a shout. And hopefully I'll hear everybody tomorrow morning. So have a great week.
Thanks, Jen.
Take care, Brandon.
I can figure out how to close this thing.
I'm trying to figure out how to turn the recording off.